All right, today's show on Fox News, FAWKS News is for the left. If I am on the right and you have a chance to persuade me to the other side, this is a question I think would absolutely have to be answered. I'd love to know how you answer that question. Leave me a comment in the comments below and let me know if I was a Trump fan on the fence after the debates, if you could answer this question, how would you answer this question as somebody on the fence? Because this is a question that I think is overshadowed mainly in part by the new Taylor Swift endorsement, which had to come out pretty quickly, because I think more than just myself was questioning this move by the Democrats this week. By the way, this isn't pro-Trump or pro-anybody. If you go back to 2 episodes prior to this, I did a kind of exposing why possibly The Rock he didn't endorse Trump, but the big media, the big right-winged media made it sound like The Rock endorsed Trump. He had some very nice things to say, but now we could see that maybe there's evidence that he said those nice things because maybe he just became the board of directors of the UFC, WCW. And for sure, last time I checked, that was a pretty conservative crowd over there. So again, money might have been the bottom line there. However, this particular endorsement of Kamala Harris by Dick Cheney has somebody like myself baffled. I served very early on in Bush's and Cheney's war on terrorism, the 20-year war against the axis of evil. And I was bought in to the fact at 19 years old, when I found myself in the middle of Afghanistan at 19 years old in the very early 2000s, I remember thinking, I'm looking for the weapons of mass destructions. I am fighting the axis of evil. I was all bought in. Now, later on into my later 20s and 30s and in my 40s, I realized I had been bamboozled by what I like to call now as a military industrial complex. But this might not be a me thing. This might be a thing that actually spawns from the left. Maybe, just maybe, and I'm going to show you some receipts here, the left was the one that presented all the evidence of a wild conspiracy theory, a conspiracy chase that led to many folks searching for something other than big government or the big right. So I blame you, the left. I blame you, the left. I don't blame the right. No, I take that back. I do blame the right, but I also blame the left for the big Trump RFK style movement, which maybe it's not a Trump. Maybe if we use a little bit of empathy here and we don't have our Trump derangement syndrome triggered, maybe, just maybe, it's not Donald Trump that these fringe right-winged folks are praising. Maybe it's the idea or the thought of something other than the big government. Let me explain. Don't quit on me here. If we go back to Macklemore, you remember Macklemore? He made it really big. I think it was like 2013, 14, 2012 when he made it, but he was writing music way earlier than that. And one of his original songs, way before he made it mainstream, was a song actually entitled Bush. Now, if you remember Macklemore, just a rapper, guys, listen, I get it. It's not a credible source, but Macklemore was influential. He was anti-music establishment, mainstream music, right? He was all about producing his own stuff and selling out to only himself type deal, but pretty left wing out of Washington State. Definitely had a lot to say against Bush and Dick Cheney. But he wrote a song called Bush, and Green Day was writing songs like this too, and Eminem was writing songs like this too. But I think this is important to note because this is a snapshot of what the left was thinking. If you don't remember, or if you're too young to remember, I want to know if you have an epiphany. I want to know if what I bring you today is you have a wondrous thought, something new, a new perspective on how you're going to look at politics going forward. If so, leave a comment for me in the chats. But I want to give you a snapshot for those of you who are too young to remember this, of what the left thought of the right, of George Bush more in particular, and Dick Cheney, what the left was thinking. And I think Macklemore is a good representation of that, but I have more than just Macklemore. I just thought this was an interesting one. But this was a song. I think he wrote this in like 2005 or 6 or something like that. But it's the second verse that you can scroll down to where he says, but basically the song is titled Hello Americans. Actually, the name of the song is Bush, but the intro is Hello Americans. My name is George Bush, and I'm going to do a rap for y'all. Check it out. So he's speaking as if he's George Bush. The chorus is, I'm evil, but y'all didn't know though. Now y'all stuck with a president that y'all didn't vote for. Unemployment is up. Huh. Hang on, I'm going to keep reading. But unemployment is up. The economy is in a ditch. Our country's at war, but I don't give a shit. I'm rich. I love this other course though. This other verse. I'll bring it back up here so you know I'm not fibbing you here. Let me pull up the receipts. Call him pals like my brother. All right, I admit it. I hate him. Where's Dick Cheney at? Probably off in Iraq finding some oil to tap. Tell him I got up on that, and y'all still think it was bin Laden when it was us and the Masons plotting on oil profits. Us and the Masons plotting on oil profits. Wow, that sounds like a far right-wing conspiracy theory. But wait, that was from a left's perspective. That was the left's perspective in the early 2000s. That's what the left thought about Dick Cheney and George Bush. They thought Dick Cheney, if you don't remember, if you're too young to remember, they thought Dick Cheney was an evildoer. By the way, I love how the media likes to make you think that maybe Donald Trump was the first kind of crass or unpresidential character that's ever walked through the White House. If you will go back in time, one of the biggest scandals of the Bush administration, the Cheney administration, which there was a lot back then, one of the biggest ones was when Dick Cheney told the CNN guy to go fuck off and to go fuck himself. Here's a whole article from June 26, 2004. Sources who related the incident to CNN said the vice president had told Leahy either to fuck off or to go fuck himself. Cheney would not confirm using the word. That's not the kind of language I usually use, the vice president said in the interview during a campaign stop in Michigan. When asked if he had cursed at Leahy, Cheney answered, probably. Do you have any regrets? He asked. No, I said no, the vice president responded. So like even back then, if you could go back in time, that was a big deal. This was a vice president saying to go fuck yourself or go fuck off. So there's nothing new. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that one, Dick Cheney was very powerful. This is a CBS News article from back then. It says the suits are not routine disputes about the powers of Cheney's office. The Times says rather the plaintiffs, the Sierra Club, and the Judicial Watch contended that Cheney and his staff violated open government measures known from the Federal Advisory Committee Act by meeting behind closed doors outside lobbyists with oil, gas, and nuclear industries. Like this whole thing was this weapons of mass destruction. It was all a lie. And here's the funny part about it is that the left was the ones exposing those lies that created the later generations of conservatives to question the doctrine that they had voted for, that they'd be like, if you're on the left, think about how devoted you are and how much you don't care about Ashley Biden's diary, how you don't care about Hunter Biden's laptop and some of the crazy things that may or may not be on there, how you're so bought in, same as the right, are so bought in that they're willing to not even give those things a close examination because we blame it. Well, the other guy's doing this. Well, we should know what all the guys are doing, honestly. But because when we're so politically blindsided, when we're so focused on the team, we close our eyes. The right was like this back in the early 2000s. We all thought there were weapons of mass destruction. We were all gung-ho. By the way, it was the left that came up with the idea that there might be more nefarious, something more nefarious about 9/11 than just planes hitting the building. Like maybe the Bush administration allowed it to happen. Like maybe they knew it was going to happen. Actually, there was a crazy lunatic even back then in the early 2000s that predicted that a bin Laden would fly an aircraft into a World Trade Center. And his name rhymes with Pelik Holmes. Or Alex Crones. That's a great video. It's a wild video, but it's a real video that does exist where he predicted that a bin Laden, the Bush administration would use a bin Laden to fly some planes into a World Trade Center. Bonkers. I know it's wild, but it was the left that was bringing this up at the time. That's the way I remember this. I'm in my 40s now. I remember all of this. I remember as I began to learn more from the WikiLeaks and I began to learn more from other journalists and Julian Assange and all these things that, wow, okay, there was a lot of things I was bamboozled on. Stay with me. If you don't believe me that there was other articles out there about the left absolutely hating I'm sorry, I'll go back up here. That the left, here's another NBC News article. Cheney, who tonight debates in a Democratic challenge Senator John Edwards, is arguably the most powerful vice president in U.S. history. That's what CBS was talking about him. That he was known as the most, he was the architect of the Iraq war. He had the most influence on what was going on with the tortures going down in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. He was big on the FBI and rerouting the CIA and how they do surveillance with the TSA and how we surveil the people here in the United States, and the tips line, how you could call and rat out your friend, a potential terrorist, and all these things that may or may not have been constitutional. He was big back then. This is another CBS News article. Cheney's a full-fledged evil doer to many Democrats and Bush haters. I'm just trying to paint you a picture that Dick Cheney and President Bush were absolutely hated by the left, and the right, the conservatives, were completely bought in on Bush. The conservatives my age, because we're the ones that went and had to fight that war. So the boomers of that generation, the rich elites, they were kind of used to this, but my generation was actually fighting the Bush war. So we kind of had to get ourselves hyped up on it. And then we later learned that we were bamboozled. And this is my point to the whole story. But I don't want to give it to you right now because I think this is a much more important article. Let me play this article for you guys. This is from Salon 2004. This is an article written, and it's about a book that Richard Pearl, or Perle, I don't know how you pronounce his name. I can't remember, but Richard Pearl, say Pearl, looks like a pearl to me. Richard Pearl was also an architect of the Iraq war. He was a head advisor for Donald Rumsfeld. He actually was in the Reagan administration as well, but very influential in the weapons of mass destruction thing. Okay. And he and this David Frum wrote a book called Into Evil. And this is a left-wing journalist that wrote an article all about this. And I'm going to read you parts of this article. And I want you to take now what this article says. And is what he is saying that the big government right was doing in the Bush measure, is that not exactly what is going on in big government right now? And I think we could objectively agree at this point in time that Biden has not been in charge. I think unless you are just completely not a critical thinker and you live under a rock, I think you have to admit that Biden is not running the country. And Harris, who has the worst approval rating from her own party, worst approval rating, who couldn't even get 2% of the vote out of her own state in her own primary election, couldn't make it out of Iowa, past the Iowa caucus in her election, and it has the worst approval rating. I think we should all objectively agree that they're definitely not the ones running the country. Absolutely, they are not running the country. They could not run the country. They can't. But what if Bush and Cheney, what they were trying to accomplish, move through the Clinton administration, move through the Obama administration, because there's only one point, there's only one part of history. There's only 4 years out of the last 20 that what Bush and Cheney appeared to be trying to do in the early 2000s wasn't actually trying to come to fruition in those 4 years. And that was during the Trump administration. Everything that I'm about to read you, that the left hated about the right, has been happening through every administration except one. And I'm not saying that you should vote for Donald Trump or you should be a Trump fan, but I'm going to propose to you that maybe the right wingers that felt like they were bamboozled by the right, who bought into the right, who listened to the left's evidence that the right was corrupt, and maybe, just maybe, they were so offended that when they found somebody like Donald Trump, like somebody like RFK, who was not the establishment that bamboozled them, maybe that's why they got away from the neocons, the rhino rights, or whatever you want to call them. So maybe now you can't blame them. Maybe it's not a Trump savior complex for them. Maybe it's we were bamboozled by the rhino right, and the left proved that to us. But we are also, now we've learned from that. We have learned, those of us on the right who learned from our mistakes with the Bush and Cheney, we learned those mistakes, but we're watching you, the left, make those same mistakes now in the Biden-Harris administration, because everything that they were doing in the Cheney and Bush administration is being carried out right this moment. Let me prove it to you. This is a left-wing article written about Richard Perle and David Frum's book, Into Evil, Undaunted by the Iraq Debacle, Uber Hawks, David Frum, and Richard Pearl air their fevered wet dream of a national security superstate that slaps down uppity Muslims, bombs North Korea, slices and dices civil liberties, scatters the Palestinians like birdseed. That's what the left didn't like in 2004. What is happening currently by the left in 2024, right? A little bit bonkers, I know. There's a part of this where it says an end of evil is like Bush on crack. It's a kind of neocon orgy, a Bohemian Grove weekend for militaristic, moralistic, a chance to get naked and do tribal Lord of the Flies dances, invade Iran, kill Yasser, drink Kim's blood. But if it's the recommendations are a little too extreme, even for George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Paul Warwitz, Truman says is an underlying worldview is identical to theirs. It's the kind of CAT scan of the Bush administration collective brain. What they're saying right there really quick is that basically because Pearl and Froome are the ones that are advising Bush and Rumsfeld and all these things, that this is a snapshot. This article, this book that they wrote is a snapshot into what was going on in the Bush administration at the time. So here are some of the author's policy recommendations from the book, and in the book is titled An Into Evil, written by Richard Pearl and David Froome. All right, so here are the takeaways. 1, preparing to launch a preemptive attack on North Korea. That's what the left did not like of the right at this time, is that the right was preparing to launch a preemptive attack on North Korea after moving troops out of range of their artillery missiles. All right, number 2, taking direct action to topple a regime in Iran, going to war with Iran. What do we have going over there? What do we have going on right now in Iran and in Syria? Take a look at what's going on with the left in Iran, in Syria, in Libya, in all the surrounding countries. We have rockets going all over the place over there. Now, taking direct action to topple the regime in Iran. That's one of them. Number 3, being prepared to invade Syria. Wow, what? Of whom the authorities write, really, there is only one question to ask about Syria. Why have we put up with them for so long? That's what the right was thinking, and the left hated this at the time. Being prepared, here's number 4, being prepared to invade Libya. The illusion that Muammar al-Gaddafi is moderating should be treated as if it was a symptom of the seemingly incurable wishful delusions that afflict the accommodations in the foreign policy establishment. Let me go on. Number 5 or whatever. Taking, I don't need to read that one, but here, this is a big one. 6, abandoning the Israeli-Palestinian peace process altogether. Abandoning the Israeli-Palestinian peace process altogether in a radical departure from U.S. policy. They say the Palestinians should not be given a state. Creating a Palestinian state out of the West Bank and Gaza, they write, will not bring peace to the region because the Palestinians and other Arabs are only interested in vengeance, not justice. Now, you can agree or disagree with that thought, but back in the day, this was absolute anarchy by the left. They hated this movement. They hated everything that the right stood for in all of this. And now we see that coming to fruition. So maybe I propose to you that maybe the Trump lovers and the Trump fans and the RFK Jr. fans, maybe they are actually so anti an industrial military complex, and that they really do believe, and that the endorsement from Dick Cheney to Kamala Harris and Biden only solidifies in their brains that there has been a military industrial complex, that it has survived from the Dick Cheney movement and beyond, and it has moved through the Clinton administration, through the Obama administration, and is now coming to fruition and coming to its end game in the the Biden Kamala Harris presidency. And so maybe there was only one guy that was against all of that, and these two sides both equally hate. And that's Donald Trump or an RFK Jr. or anyone of the like. And again, I don't know Donald Trump's endgame. I really don't know. Maybe it's nefarious. I don't know. But what I do know is that he was the only one that was doing something different than the Bush-Cheney administration. The left gave the industrial military complex title to that administration. Isn't that wild? And maybe, just maybe, these right-winged folks that felt bamboozled by the evildoers, as the left put it, Dick Cheney and George Bush, maybe they see in the Biden administration and the Harris administration the same exact things that they saw in the right-wing Bush-Cheney administrations back then. And maybe that's why they are so adamant on voting in for somebody like Trump or RFK Jr. Let's not forget about RFK Jr., who had nothing to do with Trump. But they were the anti-military industrial complex. I feel like the industrial military complex is real, and I feel like that is who is really in charge right now. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment. What do you think?